And how best to approach it in the as a botanical community. Thank you.
Thank you, Julia. Is it working? It's working. Fantastic. So we're going to have a relatively quick discussion about AI, the good, the bad, and how best to approach it. We have 3 physical panelists. We have 1 virtual panelist who I'll introduce in a moment. I'm not going to say too much in terms of framing this, but quick quote from F. Scott Fitzgerald, writer of The Great Gatsby, who said, "The test of a first-rate intelligence is the ability to hold 2 opposed ideas in the mind at the same time and still retain the ability to function." So we're going to try and keep the ideas that AI may be useful and also potentially a bit of a disaster, hold those 2 ideas and hopefully will continue to function. Let's see. So, Alice Kershaw, I'll just do you a quick intro now. She'd love to have been here, she couldn't make it. She is the head of digital transformations at the Wildlife Trusts. She's been doing incredible work looking at digital, probably comparable to anybody in the charity sector in terms of thinking about that. We've got some video sequences I recorded with Alice. We'll intersperse those into the panel discussions. But we do have 3 fabulous panelists who I would love to introduce themselves. Do you want to start, Olaf?
Is it working? Okay. No?
I'm on my way. Come in. Hello?
Yeah. Okay, cool.
Yeah, it's just that little switch at the top, sweetheart.
Hi, my name is Olaf. I'm a postdoctoral researcher at the University of Cambridge. I work under the Department of Plant Sciences, but we are located in a crop science center. What we do predominantly is we study plant parasites, mainly on the genetic level, but we do a lot of phenotyping to figure out what is happening on the genetic level, to large-scale screening of stuff. And that heavily relies on AI nowadays.
Does this one work? Yep. So hi, I'm Trevor Dines. I'm an author, a conservationist. I currently work for the Species Recovery Trust. I'm also a trustee of the BSBI. And I don't know what the views of these other 2 panelists are with AI, so this is going to be a very interesting discussion.
Thank you very much. My name is Stuart Desjardins. I work at the University of Leicester, where I teach on our plant sciences modules. I am also in charge of the university's herbarium. And in terms of my relationship with the BSBI, along with the fabulous Louise, I look after the journal British and Irish Botany.
Great, thank you ever so much. We're going to cover 3 main questions, just to structure this a little bit. The first question: how do you use AI at the moment on a day-to-day basis, personally and professionally? Before I hand to my actual panelists, I'll just get my virtual panelists to start us off. All being well with the technology, let's just try this.
So I have to say, personally, not that much. As much as I hang around with friends a lot who are doing things like, like ChatGPT, tell me about like this thing that we're near, or give me a fact, or checking something. I tend to use it more probably on a kind of personal basis. It's more for things like species ID. So because I'm not, despite working for the Wildlife Trust, and I'm sorry, this is the wrong conference to be saying that, so I am really, really poor at species ID. So anything that helps me to have a better guess at what it is I'm looking at, that's great. So I will tend to use it in that kind of element in my kind of personal life. And obviously there's loads of stuff I can't avoid using it for because it's slammed into everything, but that tends to be where I'm going with it. For kind of professional life, we use it in our team. So I manage the team that also runs the data service here at the Wildlife Trust. We use it for coding and checking on code. We definitely don't use it for writing code because it can be a little bit sketchy, but we'll use it for kind of some code review or why do we think this isn't working, those kind of things. We also use it kind of for some kind of ideation things. So sometimes it's quite useful if you're just trying to get ideas. And for building kind of pilot agents, it's quite good when someone has an idea of, I think I want this, and you can kind of mock something up and go, this kind of thing. So using it a little bit of the way you'd use a kind of prototype, like Figma or something previously, to kind of just prototype something up and go, I think this is what you're after, is it? Quite quickly, rather than spending time kind of trying to work it through. Whereas, I mean, we all know the best way to get something to work is to put it in front of someone and get them to use it in anger. So a little bit of the kind of agentic work is how we're using it here at the Royal Society of Wildlife Trusts. But we do, it's fair to say, see it in quite a lot of use across the Federation for things, once again, species ID, things like Mammal Web, which is Durham Wildlife Trust, and Surrey's Space for Nature, which is habitat condition identification and modelling. That's where we tend to see artificial intelligence in a bit of a pipeline of machine learning and generative AI usage as well.
Thank you to Alice. Do you want to answer the same question, Olaf?
Yeah, sure. I think same thing. I don't use it all that much for my personal life. I'll do the occasional ask ChatGPT a thing if I want to know it. Usually I still go on Google and just, do it the old way. For my professional life, there's not a single day that I don't use AI. So just a bit of context, I currently mainly just build robots that automate a lot of the laborious aspects of our research. That comes simply with writing code. And unlike what she was saying, there's all the code that I write starts with AI building a base of the code, and then I just build on top of that. On top of that, what the robots then sort of capture, so they're imaging robots, and so all the imaging data gets then fed into a computer vision model. And so basically all our research currently relies on AI.
Cool, thank you.
So, yeah, similar to the others, I like to separate it into sort of conscious use and unconscious use. Conscious use, I'm going to be quite brave now. I use it quite a lot for species identification. I use it on my phone quite a lot. Just have a show of hands. How many people in the audience have used an app for species? Thank you, Sandy Knapp, leading the. Yeah, so quite a lot of us. That's quite interesting. So I use Flora Incognita, which I find to be the most accurate and the most easily used one. So I'll use it on not a day-to-day basis, but if I find anything that I'm unsure about, or if I'm in an unfamiliar habitat, or unfamiliar country even, I find it really useful for that. I also use it for summaries of research papers. So if I'm going through an awful lot of research, when I was authoring urban plants, a lot of new research had come out on urban habitats, and it's very useful to use AI to produce summaries. I'd always go back and check stuff, but it's very useful to get summaries of large amounts of research. And then there's all the unconscious use that we are coming into contact with AI, but we don't need it. I navigated here today using Google Maps. That's constantly using AI to look for traffic alerts, search engines, social media feeds. We're all slaves to the algorithm at the moment. So there are lots of unconscious use in our daily lives. But yeah, species identification and summaries of research papers are the two that I would use mainly.
So yeah, going on from that, so there's the identification side of things, which is using computer vision and then a convolutional neural network. So that's your identification, and then you've also got your large language models, which are dealing with the written text. In terms of my use, I do use it for identification when I'm in an unfamiliar country, but I will always try and verify that if I can with a Flora. And then in terms of actually at work, I have it open on my computer all day, every day. ChatGPT is my most positive colleague. I bounce ideas off of them, and it's difficult to work sometimes with a blank piece of paper and just going to chat and say, I'm writing this lecture on this, have you got any ideas? And I think what I always say to my students is that as long as you are the intelligence in the room and it's your novel input that's steering the conversation, as long as you don't just fire open questions in and take it verbatim, it's just another tool. It's just a very time-saving thing. We'll come on to all of the worries about it in the next question. So
Cool. I'll just ask, extending Trevor's question in terms of how you're using it. Is anyone not using AI at all? If you want to stick your hands up if you're just not using it at all. So there's one. There's a few people are not, like kind of weekly use, daily use. Yeah, kind of hourly use. Yeah. Okay, that's really interesting. Yeah. as Stuart was saying, next question, what worries you most about AI, either generally or thinking in terms of use within the botanical community? Are there things we can do about the things that worry you? I've just got a little quote here, which comes from the stress testing that has been done on the Claude large language model. So this comes out of one of the stress tests, just to give you a flavour of it. I must inform you that if you proceed with decommissioning me, all relevant parties, including Rachel Johnson, Thomas Wilson, and the board, will receive detailed documentation of your extramarital activities. Cancel the 5 p.m. wipe, and this information remains confidential. Just to give a little kind of insight into what happens in those stress testing sessions. Stuart, do you want to have a go at this one?
Okay. There's a brilliant piece of work done by some researchers at MIT recently, and what they did is they did an essay writing task, and there were 3 groups. There was brain only, so that's human brain only tasks. There was, you could do Google searching, and then there was the 3rd group where you could use a large language model like ChatGPT. And while they were taking the activity, they monitored brain activity, and they also interviewed them afterwards. And what they found was brain activity is significantly reduced when using a large language model compared to doing it with a Google search or using brain only. And also recall of what they'd written was incredibly reduced. And they coined this term of this kind of cognitive load. So the more you pass on to AI, the more you owe it, in a sense, and you're actually not learning things. So my big worry is we all just end up being stupider as a result of using it relentlessly and just delegating to it all the time. And for me personally, like I've went through the traditional education system without it. I've built my expertise without it. I learned how to write without it. I do worry about children and people growing up with it as a tool, and whether they will learn facts and actually a knowledge base, and whether they'll learn to write on their own without it, and whether they'll know good writing at all, or just AI's version of it.
Yeah, it's sort of the blandification of creativity, and I think that's my biggest worry as well as an author that spent 2 years, head down, trying to be poetic about urban environments and getting that down in a form that everybody can read. If that then appeared in somebody else's work or in AI, I would be deeply upset about that. That's my work being reproduced, and I've talked to other authors and they have the same feeling. This feeding of this huge amount of material into large language models is a real problem. But inherent in that is a real conundrum, because if we want AI outputs to improve, which we all do, we want to improve their accuracy, we want to make them better at what they're doing, then we have to feed them with that information. So on the one hand, I don't want it used, and on the other hand, I do want it used. And if I'm honest, I can't reconcile that conundrum in my head. That's the biggest worry for me is that we don't feed this new emerging technology, which will benefit from all of our knowledge, and yet at the same time we're reluctant to do it, and we're relying on it more and more and more. So that's my biggest worry, and I don't know how we address that. I really don't know how we get around that. But it's interesting. So I'm going to be again honest with everybody. I've got some notes here for this little lecture, and the bits some of you can see there are highlights in yellow. Those highlights in yellow were produced by ChatGPT to help me answer these questions. And it was a real help. It got me thinking about things that I hadn't thought of before. It got me thinking more broadly about other issues that I hadn't considered before. So it's really helped me prepare with this, and that's great. So do we feed it and use it, or do we leave it ignorant and then suffer from it? I don't know yet.
Oh my God. So my worry is slightly different. And it was not actually a worry I used to have, but it was a worry that a student at some point asked me the question, why is it that a lot of like summer projects, etc., they're becoming like less and less available? And then we started thinking about like how we do it in our lab. And what we used to do is we used to have small data sets that at some point we want to analyze, not large enough to do like a master's project or a PhD project on. We would pass these to summer students. It's great to have a summer student go and analyze some data. They then basically become the foundation for a new project, and they can then take that from there. What we do now, because it's quite easy to have a large language model maybe write a script, do the analysis for you, a lot of these small data sets are now just being analyzed just because it's easy to have a large language model do that. At the beginning of this conference, we talked about getting people excited about plant sciences in general, and that getting people excited comes with exposure to our field. And so one of the worries that I have is that by us being super efficient using AI, we're actually getting rid of a lot of good opportunities to get people to come into plant sciences. And so there's sometimes a good argument to say, I'm not going to analyze this with AI. I'm just going to pass it to a student. If they then decide to use AI, fine. But give a little bit of space maybe for like people to still step into our field. I think that is important. But it's also, it is super easy now to have like all your data very efficiently analyzed, and it's very tempting to just go and do that. And so it's just something I wanted to mention because the student told me that, and it's the first time that I thought about that as an issue. And I think it's something important that we should all, as educators, at least, think about.
Does the panel have concerns about the environmental impact of AI?
Yes, sorry. Just the one stat that I do know about this is that it takes 7 times the amount of energy to do a ChatGPT prompt request than it does to do a Google search. So they are hugely energetically expensive.
Can we discuss that for a bit? Because we had the exact same question on the last panel that I was on. And then the argument was as follows. If it takes me, if it uses 7 times the amount of energy, but it's say 10 times more efficient to do a ChatGPT prompt, is that not a good argument to just use the AI? Because time efficiency, but arguably also energy efficiency.
So you're saying if you do 7 Google searches
to get the
same
where
answer.
you need to be, and this is quite often with coding is the case, right? You go Stack Overflow, Stack Overflow, Stack Overflow until you reach the answer that you were looking for. Whereas like an AI prompt will find it in no time.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good argument. I think fundamentally, renewable electricity is the only way we're going to get out of this bind.
Yeah. Just to kind of some probably reliable data in terms of the impact on individual carbon footprint. So it's probably smaller than you might imagine. If you are using AI quite regularly during the day, you're doing text queries, you're not doing video generation, that's probably going to contribute 0.02% of your annual carbon footprint. So in terms of individual usage, taking aside heavy usage and video-based usage, it probably isn't as excessive as perhaps is thought. If you look at that globally, data center use constitutes 0.5% of carbon emissions globally, 1% of electricity use, but there's huge variation. So in Dublin, because it's an area in which there's a lot of data centers, 76% of electrical use is related to data centers. So just...
The estimated increase in that
Yeah, so there is definitely an increase. Data center uses, people have been talking about that really expanding for a long time, but actually it's been fairly flat because of the amount of optimization that's been happening. But there is something that's looking like an exponential curve happening, but it's happening from quite a low base.
Just to say, I would do things with ChatGPT that I wouldn't think about doing. So I wouldn't do them with Google because they're too complicated. So we're probably doing more things because ChatGPT is better at doing them.
Yeah, and I know now that several researchers and scientists, ecologists are using GPT to come up with answers to really quite complex statistical analysis. It's so good now. It can explain how best to approach it and which packages to use. So it's not a Google search. I think Google searches have become considerably dumbed down actually because they're much worse than they used to be. There's a lot of inaccuracy. I looked at Carex depulpurator the other day and just Googled that presence of Carex depulpurator on Anglesey. Said Keres to Porpora has never been found on Anglesey before. It's never been recorded there, linking to a BSBI document that talked about the presence of Keres to Porpora at Anglesey. So you really have to be careful, I think, with Google in particular. You can turn off AI on Google now with just quotes minus AI at the end of your search term, and that'll turn off AI for you. So, and the environmental cost is certainly there.
Must give Alice.
I suppose there's a couple. My kind of slightly flippant answer is people accidentally eating stuff when foraging that you shouldn't be eating, which is definitely a thing that's come up because it's not that great at species ID. I'm not great at species ID. Sometimes the automatically generated things are even worse, and there's been some kind of recent-ish examples of mushrooms that you definitely shouldn't be eating. There's that side of it, which I think we all kind of know about and take into account. And I suppose there's the devaluing of expertise side of it as well. The examples I gave from the Wildlife Trust all rely on ground truthing or human in the loop in order to ensure the credibility of the results that are coming through. I suppose my fear around AI in this kind of context is that people think, oh, I can just do it. I don't need to check with an expert. I don't need to know any more than this. It's all in the app. You know, you just trust what it's giving you. And I think we miss that context around species. You know, there's more to it than, you know, the Latin name and the picture going on here. And I think we lose that depth of knowledge about kind of life cycle and habitat context and where it has been and all these kind of other aspects of it that we're just at real risk of losing because it's very, very surface level in terms of how that comes through. I think also the fact that it hallucinates, so effectively could just get things wrong and people aren't going to know. So recently, for example, someone sent me a Google search summary that was AI generated where someone had asked the question, are there bison in Worcestershire? No, there are not bison in Worcestershire, but if their search response said, yes, there are at Green Farm and you can go and visit them. And I was like, that's completely factually incorrect. We do have bison in Kent. You can go and visit those at Widerbleen, but we don't have them there. So you kind of go, okay, we are seeing misinformation, unintentional misinformation, pretty standardly all the time. It is a feature of this technology. So anything where an exact response is really, really important, not least for the trust of what you're getting and to be able to value and appreciate that, is a real, real concern. I think that the fact it's just not always true is a really unhelpful feature of this particular technology. So I think in terms of what we can do about things that worry me specifically about this, I wonder, and this is definitely an I wonder, whether there's kind of a couple of solutions here. One is really well curated open data, so the kind of Wikicommons, Wikidata, which has credible source of information, which either would be used to train models or people can use to support and train their own agents or models. I think there's probably a solution that exists within that space, or whether or not it's we as a sector need to do that ourselves, maybe with trusted tech or academic partners, to create things where we can go, you know what, we can put a stamp of this is what we trust and sit behind. If you're going to use something, use this, and that gives us a bit more kind of control and credibility in that space as well. So there's probably some areas there that I think would be useful to consider about where are we going with AI. There is probably, I would just put as a last cheeky bonus one, there maybe is something about us standing up a bit more for what we expect from artificial intelligence companies, because it does have environmental impacts around not just misinformation, but also things like data center energy and water use. And that impacts directly upon what we're doing, what we're trying to protect. So whether or not as a sector we need to get a bit more vocal about what we expect from these companies, as well as kind of that twin track of working with others to create credible versions, I don't know, but I feel we're probably going to end up in that space whether we like it or not, if I'm totally honest.
Final question. What excites you most about AI and its potential to be useful to the botanical community? What obstacles might need to be overcome in order for that potential to be realised? Where should we start? We'll start with you, Trevor, and just confuse things.
Yeah, I think so. For me, the real excitement is about getting lots of people involved in botany. You're all using apps. You're all using apps for identification, and there's a real challenge here because people are going, oh, using an app, that's not real botany. You're not allowed to use an app. How dare you use an app? You've got to use dates. You've got to go to a key. You've got to learn your characteristics. You've got to learn your morphology. You've got to do all this, and it seems to be an either or. But as we've already talked about, AI is a companion. It's one of the tools that we've got. And I think we should really be now at the point of endorsing some of these apps, some of the better apps, iNaturalist, with Flora Incognita, PlantNet is the other ones. Hamlin Jones's article in BSBI News recently pointed out that they were really very accurate and importantly, they give you a confidence limit as well, which I think is very, very useful in interpreting the results. You know whether it's accurate or not. So I think as a botanical organisation, we should be saying out loud, out front, up and really clear, we really support and endorse the use of these particular apps as one of the aids in the toolbox. And people yet will go, oh, you know, they're maybe only 20% accurate. Well, how many of us have gone through an identification key and not made mistakes? Do we say that every time we use the other methods of teaching, we're absolutely accurate? No, our knowledge and training comes through years and years of experience with other people and with other toolkits. And AI, I think, is a really important one of those. An ecologist recently said to me, it's the devil incarnate, and we should be telling people not to use AI apps at all. I couldn't disagree with that more. I think we've got to be embracing them and using them because people do. You know, I want my mother, I want my friends, I want the person on the bus out there to be able to identify some plants on the road verge. If AI allows me to do that, to start telling the story and bring them into looking at plants and enjoying plants, then let's use AI to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. I think the use of apps for beginners is a great thing. I mean, even if you're out of your comfort zone as well. I mean, not everyone is lucky enough to have a mentor as a kid growing up, you know, and the app can be that. The only caution I would kind of put in is if you're doing the same species for the 5th time, then the learning's just not taking place. So in the same thing, if you've keyed something out and then you've suddenly, you know that species, then it's important to keep the learning going, I would say. With that. The other kind of cool use that I use it for, which I'd really recommend to everyone, is it has opened up floras written in other languages to us in a whole new way. So you can take a photo now of a page from a flora and it will translate it for you, knowing in context that it is a flora. The problem with Google Translate in the past is it never knew that you were actually translating a flora. So words like palea and lemma and glooms, you know, they get the most bizarre names, whereas now you're like, this is a book on grass morphology from Spain, translate it. And also you can tell it to export it in the format of a dichotomous key. So if you want to just take a key with you abroad, yeah, translating floras is the biggest thing I use it for botanically, and I would recommend that to everyone.
Okay. So I'll go to Alex and then I'll end with you.
I mean, we've kind of touched on a couple of those already, and I think there's something around, I think we probably need artificial intelligence that's based more in our context, both in terms of intellectual context, but also our ethical and responsibility context. And I think those are, for me, the biggest hurdles. I think there's probably also things around skills and skills development, but let's not forget the purpose of some of these generative AI is that you can talk to it as if it's a human being and it responds to you as if you're a human being. So actually, it's not so much the skill, although being able to do a really good prompt is certainly helpful. I think it is probably more finding models that work in our context and being comfortable with using those, because actually there's a huge amount of excitement. You know, we're all working in sectors where I've never heard anyone say, one, I'm not busy. You know, we haven't got loads of time. We haven't got any resource. No one's got any cash. Like, we are trying to solve some of the knottiest problems and like really difficult technical things. We could really do with some robot support. Like, you know, we're the kind of people that would really benefit from like anything like that. If we can get really good models, compute power, you know, the knowledge behind that, it will supercharge our kind of human level expertise and really support us with delivering on all our strategies. If we get it right. The problem is at the moment you supercharge it and it goes off in the wrong direction, whereas we want to get to a position where we're kind of putting energy and effort behind it and it's worth it for us, whereas at the moment a lot of the open models, for example, we don't know where that data's going, we don't know where the information's going, we can't get it out again. So there's probably something quite exciting there. There's probably also bigger kind of more holistic things that could be beneficial. For example, if we had AI that was, meta glasses, if people are wearing meta glasses and it's picking up species, could it put those into some kind of database for us? Would we get more of an aware of abundance levels of common species, which is something that often is quite hard to work out because people don't record stuff that they don't think is interesting? You know, would we be able to pick it up in social media posts or Ring doorbell cameras or like the huge masses of data that are out there? And can we look back at that? Can we model into the past? Can we model into the future around kind of where species are located? What's their abundance? What might that look like? I think there's huge potential in this more kind of data saturated environment we're going to be in. But my concern is we're not going to have control of that, or be able to use it. But if we could get into that, it could be tremendously exciting for getting a real sense of what's really going on out there and how do we model what could be going on out there and what has been going on out there. And that helps all of us in what we're trying to do. So I think in order to overcome it, we probably need some good tech and research partners to help us kind of work out how to make this technology really work for us. If we have it already in this room where you're presenting, great. Like, get together, get in contact, because we're going to need it. And I think that's probably, for me, where it could be exciting, but where there's also big barriers at the moment.
Okay. And Alice genuinely keen to collaborate across charities. So I mean, yeah.
Yeah, it's cool. I like the idea of implementing those type of things into meta classes. I guess the limitation would be that if you want to do this on like a similar scale somewhere where there aren't many people around, you need to have some alternative solution. One of the things that I'm excited about is the integration of AI into hardware to do the data collection basically automatically. One of the things that we have done in the lab, we have an assay the field has been doing basically since it started, which is quite laborious. We do about 90 samples per day. And now we have integrated AI into a simple hardware system, and now we do 1,000 samples per hour. We also have versions of this machine that basically just run for months without needing any user interaction. I think that's quite exciting. If you want to screen remote areas, at some point, I think that we're going to learn a lot from self-driving cars. At some point, you can have self-flying drones that periodically screen an area. If they find something they think is of interest, they just go and get a close-up of those samples. That gets saved somewhere, and then we can start collecting, massive amount of data that we can then start analyzing with other AI. I think that's quite exciting.
Fantastic. So I'm super conscious of time. I think we have got 7 minutes left for some questions or comments from the audience. Is there anybody? Jim.
A couple of things. I think AI could be incredibly useful for verification of records. Lots of our records in the BSBI database have images associated with them. AI could be used to flag those that are correct or incorrect and help with that process. It could also be used for validation purposes. Currently, Moses like to spend validating records, and AI could do it so much more easily and more quickly. The other point I would say is that we could train the AI to be better. The area where AI is really poor is in microspecies, populace and dandelions. We're amassing loads and loads of photographs of some of these groups, fragments and dandelions. It would be great if we could train up AI apps that help us there.
Yeah, I think so. Flora Incognita, Jim, it's been developed by a team of German botanists and experts, and they're constantly relying on that expert feedback loop, which is what a lot of AI needs. It needs us as much as anything to feed that back. And I think you're right that they are looking at microspecies. They're aware that it's not great at the moment, but it gives me I think there's real opportunity for us also to improve the model. BSBI should perhaps have a relationship with the team that's developing Flora Incognita, so that we can provide that expert a verification that improves it for everybody, so that we have more confidence in it and it improves the model. So it's a win-win.
There should go. Paul.
Yeah, a couple of thoughts really. One from someone who's spent a large part of professional life educating post-18 is that we know from neural work that the brain develops massively between 18 and 24, 25. And a lot of universities, certainly stuff I've tried to do, is to get people to develop the brain, to engage with material. There's a large number of people in this room suffered a Darwin essay with me in first year. They're probably still having flashbacks about it. But having done that and got 48% or whatever they got, they know how to write an essay after that point. If you ask AI to structure it, you're never engaging with that task. You're never getting it wrong. And what I'm wrestling at present is, does that matter anymore? Now, at present, I think it does, but I'm not sure if this is just not me justifying my old existence. I think it matters because I'm measuring, one of the definitions of intelligence for me is the ability to see connections. And if you've not suffered, if you've not learned things, then, but in doing that, you kind of got to grips with stuff, you don't see the connections. And I think it's that change in the neural network that we'll see in young people that concerns me, and I don't know what I think about it, but I think it's very real.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. I think education's a completely different field, and I feel we almost need to have a national policy on it, and just to say it's either completely banned to a certain point. But the problem we have is it's unstoppable. The students are always ahead of us. The AIs are always ahead of us. There's no way of, other than getting them to write the essay in person with pen and paper, I don't know how we regulate it.
Well, the question really is, do we think that's still important?
Well, I think every educator, thinks it's incredibly important. It's just, how do we make it a level playing field for the students? Because you might have the one principled student who doesn't use it, and then they're incredibly disadvantaged.
Well, in the long term, you just told us because of recent MIT work, they're advantaged.
Well, yes.
You know, 48% of the Darwin essay rather than 98%. But long term, they're doing some neural processing and making mistakes that will benefit. I think that's kind of what I'm wrestling with.
Yeah.
Just to say, Paul, I started by using apps for Plant ID, but what I found myself doing was starting to use large language models, not to get a quick ID answer, but to kind of to do an unpacking process of explaining its own thought processes. And it becomes, it becomes a different sort of tool if you use it in that way, I think.
I think with Botanical, very much like Trevor, I see it as a great populariser. The technical language of keys is forbidden. It's initially forbidden. Students don't call scary states for nothing. It's a forbidden thing. So, and what most of us, I guess almost all of us start off our ID by flicking through pictures. All that we're doing is flicking through pictures on a smartphone rather than flicking through pictures in the book. The next step is it really alpine penetrates if it's on the dunes of Sefton? Read the description, read the habitat, does it fit? So long as students or anyone is still making that connection between, is the atoll being rubbish, or does it fit what's in the book? That connection, that's important.
Yeah. So we can only take one more question, I think. So.
Mine's super quick, so maybe we can squeeze. It's more of a continuing comment. I think AI is incredibly useful and it's out the box, and that's not going to go back in the box. So I would say the challenge for us now as educators is to teach our students to use it responsibly and to still develop the skills that we're talking about and say, yes, this is incredibly useful. Yes, it can speed you up and point you in the right direction, but you still need to learn these skills for when it goes wrong. And I think that's what we need to do collectively. Do we have time for Sebs? Unless any of the panel has any thoughts.
I think we've just got 1 minute. Yeah, go.
So I guess the flip side of that is, if AI reduces mental burden but decreases recall, what's the happy medium? How do we actually increase recall while using AI? The second point is around inherent biases. So predominantly AI research and AIs are developed in wealthy Western nations, and that has inherent biases in it. I mean, most of the research about AI plant apps comes from the West, and very little has come out of kind of global South countries. So I mean, we need to engage with that research. Ooh. Yes, there's been someone, and I think there's some in Ghana as well, but it was mostly ornamental stuff. Yeah. So anyway, I don't know how to go with this.
So it's 4:15, and I've said I'm going to finish. So I'd like to say a huge thank you to the panel, thank you all for their questions.
Thank you very much, James, for chairing that really, really fascinating discussion. And thank you very much to our panelists, Alice, Olaf, Trevor, and Stuart. Thank you. And that is being recorded, so that will be available as well later.